Welcome to Conversations Live with Vicki St. Clair. Talk radio to inspire, inform, and stimulate. Bringing you enlightened discussions with authors, creatives, innovative business and health professionals, and ordinary people living extraordinary lives, sharing their expertise and life stories, making a difference one word at a time. Now, here's your host, Vicki St. Clair.
And welcome, everybody. Welcome. Coming up today, both of my guests share a love of poetry. They say it sets you free. But that's not the primary focus of today's show. In their new books, my guests both write of teachings and lessons that we might consider paradoxical. For example, in The Jewel of Abundance, Ellen Grace O'Brien reveals an overlooked aspect of yoga philosophy from ancient Vedic teachings. That scripture says spirituality and prosperity can and should go together, not something we'd normally connect. And my first guest shares lessons from a multi-billion-dollar company. You might know it. It's called Google, and a Zen monastery kitchen. Again, two things we wouldn't typically connect in the same frame. So let me bring on my first guest. He is Mark Lesser. He's a CEO, Zen teacher, and he leads trainings and talks worldwide. He's delivered mindfulness and emotional intelligence programs at many of the world's leading businesses, including Google, and is currently CEO of ZBA Associates, providing mindfulness-based leadership training. He's written a great new book called 7 Practices of a Mindful Leader, Lessons from Google and a Zen Monastery Kitchen. Mark Lesser, welcome.
Thanks, Vicki. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, what a great title for your book. But, I mean, seriously, when you first hear Lessons from Google and a Zen Monastery Kitchen, you think, what? That's kind of interesting. Could these be in the same book? Let's just begin with a little of your background, and then we'll find out how these play in. I read that you took a year's leave of absence to go to a Zen center, and that turned into 10 years. So tell us what happened.
Yeah, as you can imagine, my parents were not thrilled about this.
You were at college, right?
I was.
Yeah.
I was at Rutgers in New Jersey and came out to the West Coast for what I thought was going to be a year. And right as you said, I completely kind of fell in love with Zen practice and the Zen Center community, and I think one of the really surprising things was how much the different work situations that I kept finding myself in, and leadership roles, and how pivotal that was. You know, just that this sense of really loving work, and work as a practice of self-awareness and as a practice of service, and it kind of set me on a path of I wondered, like, why wasn't everyone working in that way? And the statistics about people not being engaged in their work are kind of drab and very underwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
And I decided that this was what I wanted to do with my life, was this integration of awareness practices, contemplative practices with business and getting things done. And I ended up going right to business school, and then started out of business school. I started a greeting card and calendar company called Brush Dance. So we were one of the first companies in the world to make things out of recycled paper, and I did that for about 15 years, actually. And it was after that I found myself coaching Google engineers and teaching mindfulness inside of Google's headquarters.
Mm. So a couple of points I want to make here, because I think it's important. This book it's called 7 Practices of a Mindful Leader, but these are the same kind of principles we apply to life. And number 2 is that you say that business executives come to you for mindful leadership experiences for the same reasons that, Joe Blow down the street wants to learn to become more mindful.
Exactly, yeah. And even it can be a little, I think, confusing, this word leadership, that people often think about leadership as a particular role in an organization, but but I mean something much broader than that. That in a way, leadership is all about influence, and and we all have influence not only in our work lives but in all parts of our lives. And yeah, I mean, I call it the dirty little secret of the business world is that it's all human beings. So much of this kind of practice is this integration of a lot of these kind of emotional intelligence competencies and skills along with how to actually have influence and how to get things done.
Right. Well, I want to look at the 7 practices in a moment, but first of all, I want to talk about something that, for some reason, this just really resonated with me, and I'm sure it will with other people. You say if you have fear of change, you can avoid that by instead seeking alignment. So talk to us about that, if you would.
Yeah, that in some way, change. In fact, I find I've noticed people. There's a lot of very popular courses out there now called Managing Change, and there's something ironic to me about this idea that as though we can manage change. I mean, yes, we do need to be good. We do need to be good at kind of noticing, accepting, living with change. But what I talk about is the power of noticing the gaps between what actually is and where we want to be, and these can be particular qualities that we might want to develop in ourselves, different emotional intelligence qualities, or it might be for people who are in the world of work, goals that we have in terms of maybe revenue or new product ideas, but just seeing and noticing the gaps between what is and where we're moving, and how this is a really important skill, and partly how can we get more and more aligned with what's important to us, what our deepest values are, and how we're living our lives. I think alignment and going in and out of alignment, but paying attention to the gap between in the world of alignment.
Right. And you say that can actually be a downside for some people, that figuring out, oh my gosh, there's a huge gap here, can make us painfully aware of a significant lack in our life, or perceived lack. But the benefits of mindfulness, you say, lead to greater productivity and improved leadership skills, more job satisfaction, more of a sense of well-being. So that's where we're aiming to get, right?
Exactly. And even sometimes, like when I teach people these meditation practices or mindfulness practices, listening practices, often what happens is people get into touch with some of the ways that maybe they're not so aligned, that we're really good, we humans seem to be really good at avoiding discomfort and things that are painful. We often like to avoid when we're out of alignment. I mean, I tell the story of, it was 13 years into me being the CEO of this publishing company, this greeting card and calendar company that I mentioned, and I still remember the moment when I walked into my office and something in me said, my heart isn't here anymore with running this company, and I immediately wanted to push that thought and that feeling away, because that meant that I was out of alignment in my own life, and that there'd have to be changes, and this was hard because I felt, one, I had a lot of identity with this company that I started, and two, who wants change? I didn't want to have to figure out what I was going to do next, but I needed to follow my own instructions and pay attention to what was happening there, and to see. My first step was, is there something I could be doing differently? What is it about my work that feels? Why do I feel that my heart isn't here? Can I change that, or do I need to make some larger change? Right.
I can certainly relate to that myself, and almost feeling cheated because you've worked so hard to get here, and now it's like, okay, this isn't where I want to be anymore, but almost not daring to admit it yourself. But I see life now more as chapters than a marathon. It's more of a marathon. So let's talk about the 7 practices. And these came together with somebody else you used to work with, and then you've adopted and adapted them for the purposes of this. And so they start with 1 and 2 practices are love the work and do the work. I wonder if you'd talk about those and what you mean by practice.
Sure. Yeah, as you were saying, these practices actually came out of when I was working with a group of Google engineers and other Google employees, wanting to train them in what does it take to actually be a mindfulness teacher and be a meditation teacher. So they came out of that motivation, but they felt like they had much more broad applications to me than that. It was how I wanted to work and how I wanted to live my life. So the first 2 practices, love the work and do the work. So it's about loving the work of self-awareness, loving the work of discovering what it is to be a human being. Even going back to what we were just saying, it's loving the work of noticing when we're in alignment and noticing when we're not in alignment, and learning from that. So this is, loving this kind of process of growing, and of the intention and activity of supporting others and helping others. And doing the work means that in order to do that, we also really need to have a practice. That we humans need some kind of dedicated practice, meditation, walking meditation, journal writing, other things where we can step outside of the busyness of our lives and just have a time and place where we can cultivate this kind of self-awareness and acceptance, curiosity, self-love. And then we need to be able to bring that into our daily lives, bring that into our relationships, our work life, our influence. So this is, in a nutshell, the practices of loving the work and doing the work.
Right. And I've seen several of the videos of you teaching at Google, and you're teaching, as you said, engineers and developers, etc., how to become mindfulness teachers. Are they then going within Google and teaching that to various groups?
They are. It's actually been a very successful and heartwarming program, I must say, to see, often people start by coming and taking one of the programs that I'm teaching, and they find that there's something really moving about that, and they want to be more involved in practice, in their own mindfulness and meditation practice. And then there's something very potent. If I am standing up in front of a room of Google employees, and next to me is another Google employee who's gone through the program and who's now teaching the program, there's something, it just kind of builds trust and connection to have that kind of arrangement.
Interesting. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk to you about, you say we need to let go of being an expert. We live in a world today where everybody is striving to be an expert, so I want to look at that when we come back from break. You're listening to Conversations Live with Vicki St. Clair, and my guest is Mark Lesser. His book is 7 Practices of a Mindful Leader. We'll be right back. Please stay with us.
Parkinson's disease affects as many as 1 million people in the United States. At the Parkinson's Disease Foundation, it's our mission to beat this disease. To learn about the Parkinson's Disease Foundation, or if you want to help support our work, visit our website, pdf.org, or call us at 800-457-6676. In the Northwest, contact the Northwest Parkinson's Foundation at nwpf.org.
Sensory sensitivity, repetitious behavior, lack of eye contact, You can see signs of autism in children as young as 18 months. Learn the signs at autismspeaks.org/signs. Brought to you by Autism Speaks and the Ad Council.
Conversations Live with Vicki St. Clair airs live every Monday at noon. And now you can also catch the show during drive time at 6 a.m. every Friday. Hear from New York Times bestselling authors, innovative business leaders, cutting-edge health and wellness professionals, award-winning journalists, filmmakers, explorers, and adventurers. Tune in to Conversations Live with Vicki St. Clair, Mondays at noon Pacific Time and Fridays at 6 a.m. right here on Alternative Talk 1150.
Conversations Live with Vicki St. Clair. Innovative business leaders know to advertise here. Learn how affordable it is at conversationslive.net.
Real people, real life, real radio. Alternative Talk 1150.
And welcome back, everyone. You are listening to Conversations Live with Vicki St. Clair. And my guest is Mark Lesser. His book is called 7 Practices of a Mindful Leader, Lessons from Google and a Zen Monastery Kitchen. Before we get into the next thing, I find it interesting in the introduction of your book, you were talking about when you were in the Zen Center, Mark, and you said that the Zen Kitchen and the meditation room are the heart of the organization, and they're very interconnected.
Yeah, well, in some way, both the meals are prepared in the kitchen, and then most during the kind of retreat part of the schedule there, which is about half of the year at this place called Tassajara Zen Mountain Center. The food is brought, every meal into the meditation hall where people eat. So there's that connection. But then I think I also feel that there's the connection of going from doing meditation practice in the meditation hall and then getting up and walking right into the kitchen to work. To go from that environment of just sitting to the environment of being with others and chopping carrots and putting together ingredients and making really great, highest quality food for people.
Right.
And there's also that sense of very kind of conscious sense of practicing while it's not some like, well, now I'm going to some completely different attitude and environment. No, it's like this kind of radical sense of, we were using the word alignment earlier. So like to bring that sense of focus and care and attention into our work, and seeing work as a practice.
Interesting. So let's go back to the 7 practices. We looked at 1 and 2, love the work and do the work. And don't be an expert is number 3. And as I said, so many people are striving to be seen, even if they're not, but they're striving to be seen as an expert in something. Many coaches encourage that, write a book, you'll be seen as an expert.
Right.
And you say, we need to let go of that. So tell us why.
Yeah. So of course, I want my doctor or my surgeon or my car mechanic. I want them to be expert.
Right.
But when it comes to the world of relationships, when it comes to the world of collaborating, of learning and growing, no one's an expert as a human being in the world of this. And to me, this is the world of mindfulness is really asking the question of how can I what does it mean to be a full, thriving human being? I sometimes will joke when I'm teaching in the corporate world that my wife thinks it's hilarious that I'm teaching emotional intelligence, right? Or that, or that in the sense that anyone it takes real humility in this realm. Like I can teach mindfulness and I can teach emotional intelligence, but I know I'm no expert in these things in my own life.
Right. connecting to your pain is the last stage in this first group of what you call the investigative stage of the 7 practices. We need to take our pain, we need to transform it into learning and into opportunity, you say.
Yeah, it's interesting, both of these practices of don't be an expert and connect to your pain. One of the expressions that people often would use in the programs I would teach at Google was, it's an opportunity to take your game face off, right? So often, the game face is the part of us that we want to project, or the expert, or the part of us that's not vulnerable. And in truth, we humans are pretty darn sensitive and vulnerable. And there's so much to learn by dropping that that everything's fine all the time, and being able to feel our own discomfort, our own out of alignment. It's just part of being a human being is to feel that sense of longing and loneliness and lack of connection, and by leaning into those, that's where the real growth, learning, and joy is lurking, is through facing our own difficulties.
Right. Why is it so difficult for us to feel self-compassion?
Well, I think it's like one of my Google scientist friends is fond of saying that we are descendants of the nervous apes. that our ancestors that were chill and were always just hanging out, they all got killed. It was the ones. It's kind of built into us to be scanning for threats, to be looking for what can go wrong. And I think this is something that we do, externally in our environment, and we do it internally. So I think that inner critic, that part of us that can be really, really hard on ourselves, I think is partly that negativity bias, that nervous ape that wants to make sure that we're safe.
Mm.
But we tend to overdo it. We tend to way overdo it, and we do it in a world where there's not nearly the kinds of threats that there were, for our ancestors. So I think it takes some real retraining to notice when we are self-critical, and little by little to it's interesting. I've done some work with people who teach self-compassion or mindful self-compassion, and often people have trouble with that word in the business world or the corporate world. So I like to turn it into calling it building inner strength.
There we go. There we go. And so the next 2 practices are about connecting, about connection. Connect to the pain of others, and the other is depend on others. Difficult for some people to get there.
Yeah, again, both it's extending the practice of feeling our own pain is noticing the common humanity, that it's not just us, it's the way of our world, even in the work world, and that of course we're all trained the sense of independence, and we do need a certain sense of independence, but there's also something about leaning in and realizing how interdependent we are, especially in the work world, but in all parts of our world, to be able to see that part of our real power comes from being able to empower others and to be empowered by others.
Right. The last one is about integration, and it's called make it simpler. Keep making it simpler. And we all know, we tend to overcomplicate things, and some people struggle with keeping things simple. So what advice do you have there?
Yeah, I think, again, like in all of these practices, starting by noticing that it takes some real effort. This is a bit of a paradox that how much effort it takes in order to become more effortless. And this, I think, this keeping it simpler is about dropping the struggle. And so much of the struggle, I think, comes from pushing away things that are difficult or uncomfortable, or this desire for some kind of a problem-free world. So it's shifting our relationships with difficulty and shifting our relationships with problems, and just being, a kind of radical acceptance. One of my favorite quotes these days is a quote from many years ago. Wendell Berry, the writer and a Kentucky farmer, said, "Be joyful, though you've considered all the facts." And so I love this sense of that we're completely facing the facts, facing what is, but practicing with this kind of radical sense of embracing and appreciating even the things that are challenging.
So let's make the connection between Google, lessons from Google, and from the Zen monastery kitchen. And you say it's really at the center of it. It's about people. So tell us that connection there.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is the reason that I got brought into Google to teach mindfulness and emotional intelligence was because of the years that I had spent in a Zen monastery, and I think in particular that I had a lot of experience and practice in integrating kind of self-awareness, emotional intelligence practices with mindfulness and meditation. And work is work. Whether you're working with a group of people in a Zen monastery kitchen, or you're working with a group of people, Google engineers trying to build things or solve problems. It's all the core of it is people learning to connect with each other, support each other, trust each other, challenge each other in healthy ways, and to find solutions.
And you go into quite a lot of detail on each of these 7 practices that we've rushed through here, and share stories there. I want to share this quote because I really liked this. It resonated with me. I've heard you say that what does not bring you alive is too small for you.
Yeah, this is a David Whyte quote, right? Anything or anyone that does not bring you alive is too small for you. And in some way, I think all of these 7 practices and mindfulness, almost the definition of mindfulness practice is that when we are not distracted by the noise, whether it's the noise in our mind or the busyness in the world, that underneath that, when we can let that go, everything is incredibly alive, and that we don't have to take. It doesn't take effort. It's not like we have to bring everything alive. It's already there. We just need to do less of what's unnecessary and be less caught by our stories and by busyness and by the daily concerns. One of my other favorite lines from a poem these days, it's actually a piece of a poem by the poet Tony Hoagland, where he says, "Remember that time and light are kinds of love, and love is no less, is just as ordinary as a coffee grinder or a safe spare tire." And even I think this sense of bringing love into not only the work of mindfulness and meditation, but to find a way to love ourselves and love our lives.
Mark Lester, it's such a pleasure talking with you. Before I let you go, I want to ask you very quickly, because we don't have much time left here. But you talk a lot about, in some of the talks you've given, about poetry setting you free, and you encourage people to bring more poetry into their lives. I'm going to ask my next guest the same question because she's an award-winning poet. But what do you mean when you say it sets you free?
Yeah, so much of our language and so much of our world is dualistic, right? We live in a very dualistic world. We live in a world where greed and hatred are very popular and just seem to be embedded in the life around us. And poetry has a way of cutting through the sense of either or, and that am I a beginner or an expert? Am I an introvert or am I an extrovert? That poetry cuts through all that and sets us free to see more of what actually is.
Love it. You can find out more about Mark Lesser at his website, marklesser.net. The book is 7 Practices of a Mindful Leader, Lessons from Google and a Zen Monastery Kitchen. And a final quick thought you'd like to leave our listeners with, Mark.
Be joyful, so you've considered all the facts.
There we go. Love it. Thanks for being with us. Appreciate your time today.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it too.
And please do stay with us. We will be right back, and we're going to talk about the Jewel of Abundance with Ellen Grace O'Brien. You are listening to Conversations Live with Vicki St. Clair.
You took the first step and quit smoking, but even former smokers may still be at risk for lung cancer. That's why SaveByTheScan.org wants you to know about a new low-dose CT scan that can detect lung cancer early. It takes only 60 seconds and could save your life. You took the first step, now take the next. Visit SaveByTheScan.org for a simple quiz to see if you're eligible and talk to your doctor about screening. SaveByTheScan.org is brought to you by the American Lung Association's Lung Force Initiative and the Ad Council.
Let's see if I guess that this just isn't working.
Knowing you have a great idea for a book is one thing, writing it another. So what's stopping you? Maybe you can't find time. Maybe you don't know where to begin. Maybe you wrote a couple of chapters, then disappeared down a rabbit hole. Or maybe you'd rather someone else write it for you. Partnering with the right coach or ghostwriter can make all the difference between talking about your book and finishing your book. As an award-winning writer and strategic consultant, Vicki St. Clair's storytelling credits span from business, health, self-help, and memoir to New York Times and USA Today best-selling anthologies. Vicki partners with people just like you at the exact level you need, whether you need a little encouragement, editorial guidance, or full-blown ghostwriting and consulting services. If you're serious about telling the story you know is inside you, stop procrastinating. Let's get your story down on paper. Contact Vicki today. Email Vicki at VickiSt.Clair.com or call 1-800-495-7617. See more about Vicki and her work at VickiSt.Clair.com.
Yeah, that could work.
Do something different with your spare time. Give baby animals at Paws a fresh start. With the assistance of caring volunteers, Paws helps hundreds of orphaned and sick kittens and puppies each year. Join us and save lives. Become a Paws foster care volunteer. For more information, visit paws.org or 425-787-2500. paws.org or 425-787-2500.
I'm Paul George of the Indiana Pacers. When I was 6, my days were spent playing basketball. When I was 6, my dream was to make it to the NBA. When I was 6, my mom had a stroke. So I want you to learn to spot a stroke fast. F-A-S-T. F, face drooping. A, arm weakness. S, speech difficulty. T, time to call 911. I'm Paul George. Spot a stroke fast. Visit strokeassociation.org. Brought to you by the American Stroke Association and the Ad Council.
Radio is very competitive. Shows soar in popularity and then flame out. Sometimes, however, a real connection is made with an audience, and success blooms year after year. For over a decade, Conversations Live with Vicki St. Clair has built a loyal following thanks to inspiring and stimulating conversation. Longevity, loyalty, exclusivity. Smart advertisers seek it out. With Vicki's valuable audience, the search is over. Discover the affordable, effective ways to advertise your business. Log on to conversationslive.net. That's conversationslive.net today.
Self-help, healing, spirituality, and more on Alternative Talk, 1150.
And welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. Well, my next guest is Ellen Grace O'Brien. She's a Yogacharya and award-winning poet who weaves poetry into her spiritual teachings. She's the spiritual director of the Center for Spiritual Enlightenment in San Jose, California. And her new book is called The Jewel of Abundance, Finding Prosperity Through the Ancient Wisdom of Yoga. And Ellen has 3 events coming up here in Seattle and Bellevue area in March. And stay tuned. We're going to give those out at the end of our conversation. So Ellen Grace O'Brien, welcome.
Thank you, Vicki. It's really a delight to be with you today.
And it's a pleasure to have you here. I'm going to start off with a question on poetry, just because I ended the last segment with a question on poetry, and it's very prevalent in both of your teachings. Why is poetry so important to you, Ellen?
Well, for me, it's so important because really poetry so often just points. It just points to what we cannot put into words. So for me, it is the opportunity to experience that which words cannot describe, but poetry is a way that points to it and allows you to experience it. And so, for me, it's a way to connect to that, and I would put a capital T on that, which we is beyond words, beyond thought even, but not beyond our experience, because it is our essential nature.
Mm. And so I talked about paradox at the beginning of the show. We're putting together things that normally people don't think of together. In this case, yoga and ancient wisdom teachings and prosperity. So tell us what you mean by prosperity for the purposes of our conversation.
Here in the book, The Jewel of Abundance, I'm talking about the life goal of wealth. That is one of the Vedic 4 goals of life. And this wealth, of course, is about wealth in all of its manifestations. So prosperity in all of its manifestations for us is thriving and having a meaningful life, a purposeful life. So it's not simply, material goods or material prosperity. We often think of it that way, but when we look just a little bit more deeply into it, we know that wealth is not just money or things.
Right. And so the 4 universal goals of life are, as you said, drawn from the teachings of the ancient Vedas. Let's look at those if we can, to live with higher purpose, to prosper in order to fulfill your dharma, to enjoy life, and to realize true freedom or enlightenment. Share some viewpoints on those, if you would.
Yeah, those goals, I think, as you mentioned, they're drawn from the Vedas, so they're thousands of years old, but they're still so relevant for us today. And I think, one of the problems we suffer from is our life being out of balance, right? We just are spending too much time at work and technology and not enjoying life, or we have those who, go off and don't put enough attention on work or family. So, we need some kind of a way to keep our lives in balance. And so these ancient goals, which are called, in the Sanskrit word is purusharthas, and the reason I'm bringing it up is because it means for the sake of the soul. So these 4 goals for life are all goals to help us stay connected to the soul, to stay connected to ourselves. So as you mentioned, dharma, to live with higher purpose, artha, wealth, to be able to draw forth what we need in order to fulfill our purpose, in order to do, what we're here to do, to enjoy our life, to experience the soul's joy or bliss, and to realize freedom or enlightenment. So those 4 goals are intended to work together. And in the foreword of the book, the fellow who wrote the foreword, Phil Goldberg, he said these 4 goals in life are like the 4 legs of a table. They keep your life in balance. And also, when you work on one, you move one leg of the table, the whole table moves. And so, all of these aspects of our life are connected.
Yes. And the primary focus of the book, the Jewel of Abundance, is on the artha. Did you say artha? Artha?
Yes, it's artha.
Artha, which is to prosper in every way. And the core teaching of yoga philosophy is that we're here to realize we're spiritual beings, you say. So what does it mean to awaken in that context?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? And you were talking about paradox. Ordinarily we wouldn't put prosperity together with enlightenment. And that's one of my major goals, is to sort of shine a light on this problem we create for ourselves by dividing up our, spiritual life and our work life, or our spiritual life and our so-called material life. In the teachings and philosophy of yoga, it's all one thing. It's a continuum. And as we participate in life consciously, so, as we do what we're here to do, as we do what we're here to do in order to contribute something positive to life, that spurs us to grow, and to further awaken. So those 2 are designed to work together. Now, I want to say it's interesting and, of course, meaningful that wealth and pleasure do not come first. What comes first is dharma, or to live a life of higher purpose. And wealth is meant, our prosperity is meant to serve that goal, not the other way around.
Mm-hmm.
So, and of course, that's the way in which our life gets out of balance. And even sometimes people think, well, I'll go about doing what I need to do, to prosper and to make all this money in life, and then I'll have time for my spiritual life.
I think, I was going to say, I think we have this thing about money and spirituality because the quotes are misquoted about it. People often say in the Bible it's money is the root of all evil, but it's actually the love of money is the root of all evil.
Exactly. That's such a beautiful example, because here it's just what I'm saying, that it has it in the wrong relationship. In other words, it has it first. And really, money or our prosperity in the world is meant to serve higher purpose, and it's meant to help us, serve life, and it's meant to contribute, to greater freedom, and certainly not to greater bondage.
Right.
But it's a fine line, learning how to do that. And the wonderful thing about these ancient goals is that yoga also gives some tools, for how to do that.
And you share a lot of these in the book, and you share a lot of stories in the book. If somebody is really struggling with this, because I have talked with people who said they have a real disconnect with their spiritual life and money, and to the, it's affecting them negatively. Where do you encourage them to start, Ellen?
I think to start at, just exactly where they are. It's always useful to start, where we are, and to look at, okay, what is the belief system that is holding that in place, in your mind, that makes it a problem, that makes prospering a problem? That has to be unlocked. So we look at what our belief system is, the proper answer, I think, to that question is it depends. It depends.
Right.
It depends on how we understand prosperity, how we approach it, what we do with it, and all of that makes a difference. So for somebody who's struggling with it, I would encourage them to look, into what the belief system is that's behind that struggle, that somehow those two can't go together.
Mm. You do say that it's a natural process for us, and the biggest mistake that people make when they're trying to find prosperity is we forget that it's a natural state.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I look at nature, just observing nature itself, how there's a tendency of the energy of life to move all things in the direction of fulfillment of their purpose. And as a poet, of course, I talk about, an apple tree, how given the right conditions, it will blossom and it will bear sweet fruit. And, so this teaching has us look at, well, what is it that we are inclined towards as human beings? And, the yoga tradition, other spiritual traditions say, well, we're inclined, to wake up to the spiritual truth of our life and to make a contribution out of that truth, So just as life will support that apple tree, life is always supporting us. I like to say life conspires to support us. And, and we can begin to look at that, and we can begin to experience more of it.
Right. I want to just clear something up in my own mind, because I heard you say that words to the effect that I don't have a soul, that's egoic. But you say that true wealth is soul wealth, conscious awareness of our innate fullness that can be expressed in all areas of our life: health, relationships, work, creativity, finances, and more. So what's your definition of soul?
I would say that soul is our essential spiritual nature. It is an emanation or an expression of ultimate reality itself, an expression of that oversoul, if you will, as the transcendentalists called it, or
right.
just ultimate reality, as the yogis would call it. So it is our essential nature, which is pure existence being, and that, yoga tells us, is not born, it doesn't die, it's changeless. It's the body, that is born, the body dies, the mind changes, but that essence of being, that what we would call the soul nature, is eternal, spiritual being.
Mm. You write that our desire for a meaningful life is even greater than our desire for happiness. And I think often people think those two go hand in hand, but not necessarily so, right?
Yeah, I think so. It depends on, I spend quite a bit of time in the book talking about happiness because there's so many different forms of it. And in order to realize that third goal in life, which is to enjoy life, we need to understand there's different ways in which we experience happiness or pleasure, whether it's sensory, whether it comes from accomplishing something, or whether it's the inherent, joy of the soul or bliss of the soul. So this goal, this urge that we have to have a meaningful life is connected to our happiness, and I think it's connected to our higher happiness. So it depends on what kind of happiness we're talking about.
Mm. You share in the book 10 prosperous promises, and I wonder if you'd shed some light on those and why they're important for us to remember.
Oh, that's such a great question. Thank you. These prospering promises come from the yoga teachings on how to live an ethical spiritual life. And when we look at them, they're really about how to change our mind, to have it have our thoughts reflect a higher state of consciousness. So I'll just point to the one that has to do with wealth itself, wealth in all of its manifestations, and that is what yoga would point to as the law of non-stealing. It says that a person who's established in non-stealing experiences the jewel of abundance. So this is really telling us that in order for us to experience this true wealth in our life, we really need to remove from our mind this idea of lack or envy or anything that would cause us to act in a way that was unethical, to try and grasp something that we didn't rightfully earn. There's so much that's contained in that we could have a whole program on that. But I want to say that all of these promises are about how our life can thrive and prosper when we learn to change our minds so that we're thinking in harmony with the higher good, with the ethical and moral laws of the universe itself.
Right. And again, we could make a whole program on this, Ellen, but very quickly, if you can do this in 60 seconds, I'd appreciate it. How do we set up our conditions for success? Just give us a very high-level view there.
I think having a daily spiritual practice is essential. Whatever you do, whether it's sitting every day for meditation, going for a walk, just creating some time and space to be, and not just to do or to think or to plan or to, any of those things that we do, but just create some space in your life so that you can experience your innate fullness, your innate wholeness, because it is out of that it comes.
All right. Sounds great. Ellen, Grace O'Brien, thank you so much. Sorry to cut you off there, but I do want to get out when you're coming to Seattle, because we promised we'd do that.
Thank you.
And you're coming up to Interfaith Community Sanctuary in Seattle Monday, March 11th at 7 p.m. East-West Seattle, the East-West Bookshop at March 13th, which is a Wednesday, March 13th at 7:30. And you're also going to a 3-day conference in Bellevue, March 14th. And you told me during the break that they're still taking registration for that. But look, you can find out all about this if you go to ellengraceobrien.com, ellengraceobrien.com. If you can't remember that or don't have internet, you can call me at 800-495-7617, and I'll tell you where and how. 800-495-7617. And you can find out more about Ellen again at ellengraceobrien.com. Ellen, thanks so much for being with us. And thank you all for joining us today. We'll see you next week. Until then, live well, live strong.
Radio is very competitive. Shows soar in popularity and then flame out. Sometimes, however, a real connection is made with an audience, and success blooms year after year. For over a decade, Conversations Live with Vicki St. Clair has built a loyal following thanks to inspiring and stimulating conversation. Longevity, loyalty, exclusivity. Smart advertisers seek it out. With Vicki's valuable audience, the search is over. Discover the affordable, effective ways to advertise your business. Log on to conversationslive.net. That's conversationslive.net today.
Are you ready for something real, raw, upfront, and honest? Then tune in each Wednesday at 2 p.m. right here for Love from the Hip. I am spiritual hypnotherapist, master esthetician, and the host, Sakura Sutter. This show is unlike anything you have ever heard and was created to help others to help themselves. Hear me follow up with guests I have hypnotized and see how it has improved their lives. I will also spotlight amazing people from around the world, their skin tips, live readings, and answers to life's burning questions. Join us each Wednesday at 2 p.m.
Conversations Live with Vicki St. Clair airs live every Monday at noon. And now you can also catch the show during drive time at 6 a.m. every Friday. Hear from New York Times bestselling authors, innovative business leaders, cutting-edge health and wellness professionals, award-winning journalists, filmmakers, explorers, and adventurers. Tune in to Conversations Live with Vicki St. Clair, Mondays at noon Pacific Time and Fridays at 6 a.m. right here on Alternative Talk 1150.
The views expressed on this program are those of the host, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of KKNW, its management, or other advertisers. Contests are the responsibility of the host of this program and not KKNW. This is Alternative Talk 1150 AM, KKNW Seattle, and KNUC 98.9 HD3 Seattle.
Hey everyone, I'm Josh with Photo Talk Radio Northwest. What would you think about a show about photography that's on the radio? Pretty funny, huh?
Yeah, but what you get every Saturday at 4 o'clock is great guests about photography. We answer all your questions about your photography needs, and we get an awesome tip from our Photoshop goddess, Amy.
That's right, so join us right here on KKNW, AM 1150, every Saturday at 4 p.m. for Photo Talk Radio Northwest, engaging conversation for the ultimate photo enthusiast.
Eric Ryder here with you on Alternative Talk, 1150 a.m. Good Monday afternoon to you. Time now for a quick look at our traffic as we approach 405 northbound, just south of 169, a collision blocking 2 left lanes. We've got stop-and-go traffic stretching from I-5 right on up to the 169 interchange. That's affecting 167 northbound as well. Stop-and-go from South 180th. Right on up to the 405 interchange. Northbound I-5 between Albro and I-90 is also slow at this hour. Stay tuned to Alternative Talk, 1150 a.m. Method Meets Magic with Dan and Jessica is coming up next. Right now, 57 degrees, sunny skies, beautiful Puget Sound.
The FBI opens up on Poway. Suspect's family responds. I'm Mike Moss. The FBI says it got a tip about a threat only minutes before the shootings at the Poway, California synagogue. Not enough time to do anything to stop it. More from correspondent Jim Root.
In a statement to the Associated Press, the FBI says it got a tip about the shooting about 5 minutes before the shooting began. The tip included a link to the reported manifesto, but there was no information about the author of the manifesto or what location was the target of an attack. The agency says agents went to work right away to identify the person who wrote the post, but the attack occurred before they could finish.
Investigators are poring over the social media postings of 19-year-old suspect John Earnest. Brian Levin with California Center for the Study of Hate and Extremism says their research shows a rise in hate crimes.
Our data shows that hate crimes in American cities went up for the 5th consecutive year, the steepest incline. And you know what the second biggest rate of increase last year was? Anti-Semitic attacks.
The family of the suspect, John Earnest, says, to our great shame, he is now part of the history of evil. The head of ISIS has put out a new video. Correspondent Clarissa Ward reports Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi appears to be trying to make a statement.
People have been waiting to see how will ISIS respond to the crushing of the physical caliphate in Syria and Iraq. And I think you're getting a glimpse of what that response will be, with a bold and horrendous attack in Sri Lanka being followed up by a bold video in which the ISIS leader appears on camera for the first time in nearly 5 years.
He famously represented porn actress Stormy Daniels, but today attorney Michael Avenatti was in court to plead not guilty for himself to a number of charges that he stole millions of dollars from clients and failed to pay taxes. On Wall Street, the Dow up 41, S&P up 7. I'm Mike Moss.
Hey there, it's Kristen Rao Finkbeiner. I am the host of a great show you're going to want to listen to called Breaking Through. It's here on Mondays at 5 a.m. We tackle the top topics facing our nation with experts from across the country that bring news to you in Washington State that talk about how your voice matters, how you can best be heard, and how you can make a difference. We're on right here on Alternative Talk, 1150 a.m. at 5 a.m. on Mondays. Breaking Through. Be there.
When we were kids, we were taught that it was good to share. Don't be shy. Share the exciting news with friends, family, and coworkers that the Efficient Life Show is now live. Tune in every Tuesday at 4 p.m. on Alternative Talk 1150. And check out more details and links to show information at theefficientlife.show. Have a topic you'd like us to cover? Drop us a note at theefficientlife.show. Time now for a quick look at our weather outlook. Well, after this sunny and warm afternoon, we've got a mostly clear evening with a low around 43. Sunny for our Tuesday again with a high near 65 and a low around 44. Mostly sunny for Wednesday, high near 63, low around 46.
The views expressed on this program are those of the host, guest, and callers, and are not necessarily those of KKNW, its management, or other advertisers. This is Alternative Talk 1150.